And I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was your podcast. Your podcast is obviously doing the same thing as us, maybe a little bit better.
I wouldn't say that.
Oh, you never know. But I mean, we'd love to talk to you about your podcast. Like, why did you start it?
Yeah, so I went on a journey as a priest when I was in Rome studying. I began studying the theology of the body in the late 90s, so probably a good 10 years after they actually were published, the audiences of John Paul II. And it had a kind of a transformative effect on me and my celibacy, the living of my celibacy, the living of an appreciation of marital love as well. You know, that's what his teaching really touches on, all facets of kind of human love, right? So I ended up coming back to the States and doing a degree, kind of a post-grad certification in theology of the body. And I had to write a thesis and I wrote it on emotional chastity. And I interviewed probably about 100 young people, single, dating, married, all kinds of people on, the healthiness or unhealthiness of your emotions, bad choices, all that kind of stuff that we can fall into nowadays. And I had all this incredible material, and so I said, you know what, I'm going to write a book. I did it for my course. So I put a small group resource together called Reclaiming Love, Connecting the Head and the Heart. That's kind of the emotional chastity book. That was my thesis. And then from there came out Wired to Love is the podcast, because what you see in the teachings of John Paul II is that, Genesis 1:26, made in the image and likeness of God, he made them male and female, right? That we are wired to give ourselves in that totality of gift of self, one to the other, right? And if we don't figure out how to do that and do that well, we really are destined for unhappiness. And this is the symptom of a culture that we're living in. We don't know how to love. We know how to self-love. We're really good at that. And that's because we're fallen creatures, right? But the real gift of self and finding, what is it? John Paul II says, you find yourself in giving yourself, right? You possess yourself as you give yourself. There's all these amazing lines he has in his writings about that. When you learn to love and love in a healthy way, you become awakened to who you really are. And so that fascinated me. And then I wrote a dating book, which was kind of the aftermath of all this material that I had. And I wrote it with 10 other young adults. It's kind of my COVID project. And then had a whole series of kind of podcast interviews on that. And now this coming year is kind of different themes. So that's kind of how the Wired to Love was born.
That's awesome. So you said you were like breaking down your book in like the beginning of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And so are you still doing that with other books? Are you just talking to other guests about different types of love?
Yeah, so what I will do now, I have 2 seasons. One season totally on emotional chastity, the emotional chastity book. There's so much you could talk about there. And then I have one on the dating book. This season is really kind of a mishmash on themes that I'm interested in from those 2 books. Like with your comrade Justin, we talked about fraternal friendships. Friendship is big, like healthy friendship, because that's healthy love. Mm-hmm. Right? You're not using another. You're trying to understand the other. You're trying to grow in appreciation of the other, be it an opposite sex or same sex. It doesn't matter. So those themes fascinate me because they're part of the solution. If we can learn to love one another in a healthy way, we're gonna change the culture. We're gonna transform the culture because the gospel is based in all that healthy love. Right?
Mm-hmm. 100%. And we talk about all the time on our podcast how like social media has just breaks that apart. It makes everyone themselves. You made an awesome point. Like you have your For You page that is for you, and it makes you just yourself. You don't care or worry about anybody else. Yeah. So that's awesome that you guys are talking about that because it's super, super important.
I just quote, just when you were just talking there, Pope Benedict says the globalization of the world has made us neighbors, but not brothers.
Wow.
So we're connected to so many people. We become our neighbor, but we don't know them in relationship as a brother or a sister in Christ.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's so.
You said something really cool too. I heard you mention self-love, and to obviously, always to a certain extent, everything in most cases, in a lot of cases, moderation is kind of like the key thing, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've really noticed, especially in kind of the lens of social media, and I would say just the younger generation in general, there's this new growing trend of something called self-care.
Oh yeah.
And I like to call it,
All
it's
about it.
really actually just selfishness and self-isolation in many cases. And that's really what you see. It kind of goes along with that quote that you just spoke about with Pope Benedict, where he's talking about, we're so connected, but we're not brothers, right? We're neighbors. We're next to each other. Because that's exactly how social media is. Everyone is on social media. Everyone's in the town forum, right? But no one is interacting with one another, right?
Yep.
And there's like comments and stuff like that on posts, but you're not actually, communicating with anyone. And many times, in many cases, it's really just, arguments and stuff like that. That's what the point that Mike was mentioning with like how your social media is tailored to you, right? And to you only. It's not tailored to you to make you connect with other people. It's tailored to keep you looking at your phone.
Yeah.
And keeping you isolated from everyone around you.
Totally. You should check out when you get a chance. There's a YouTube video called "The Innovation of Loneliness."
Write that one down, Brian.
It's super good. That alone would be a subject for your podcast because it's all about what you're saying. How social media doesn't bring us together; it isolates us in a form of selfishness, essentially, right? So it's what you're doing here is you're trying to use it for a good, right? You're trying to bring people together. You're trying to draw up good conversations amongst them and get them to think and reflect. It's powerful. That's what we need to be using it for. These types of forums, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a big reason why we started this, because we realized there's so much garbage on the internet, and like we like podcasts, but you listen to any like secular podcast, there's always going to be like an ounce of just bad. They didn't talk about something bad, or a lot of podcasts are having like adult models on there that it's slowly poisoning our brain. So we're like, let's just have good conversations where we talk all the time. Let's just, and then we have these
careful,
awesome,
yeah.
all these awesome conversations.